The honourable for Peterborough-Kawartha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can I ask through you, the Minister, on what date did he say it is empirically unlikely that Canada is less safe?
The Honourable Minister.
The safety of Canadians is my fundamental priority, and what I've indicated is that I've been briefed on the matter and I understand that violent crime is up in Canada.
Honourable Member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I should also say I will be splitting my time with the member from Durham. I'll be taking 10 minutes. So again, I will ask one more time to the Minister, on what date did he say publicly that it is empirically unlikely that Canada is less safe?
Honourable Minister.
The issue of safety is a priority for me, and I hope it's a priority for the members opposite. What I'm troubled by is that their opposition to basic premises such as Bill C-21, which is about reducing the number of handguns in Canadian society and keeping women like the member opposite.
Honourable Member.
Okay, just for fun, one more time. On what date did the Minister of Justice publicly say that it is empirically unlikely that Canada is less safe? These are his words. On what day did he say it?
Honourable Minister.
Keeping Canadians safe is a priority for mine. That's why we're addressing things like gun violence. I was a bit shocked during the supplementary estimates vote when that member voted against $83 million of funding, which would have helped with guns and gangs.
The Honourable Member.
Of Justice for Canada, folks, and he actually said that, and that was on July 31st, 2023. Next question. Minister, through you, Madam Chair, how many Ontario municipalities have declared intimate partner violence an epidemic?
Honourable Minister.
I've declared the intimate partner violence an epidemic, and it was quite clear in doing so in response to the Renfrew County inquest.
The Honourable Member.
How many Ontario municipalities have declared intimate partner violence an epidemic?
Honourable Member. Minister.
Intimate partner violence is a critical crisis situation. It is an epidemic not just in Ontario but around the country. That is why we are targeting it through measures that relate to
the Honourable Member.
Isn't that interesting that the Minister says that, and yet he also said that it is empirically unlikely that Canada is less safe? 94 municipalities, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, through you, in Ontario, how many women were killed in a 30-week window between 2022 and 2023?
The Honourable Minister.
I'm encouraged by the member's passion for addressing domestic violence. It's got to be a passionate priority for all of us. What I'm discouraged by is that when we introduce legislation that would have things like a red flag law to take a gun away from an abusive spouse, she voted against it.
The Honourable Member.
It's very interesting he brings up guns and doesn't want to answer the question. There was a man who killed a woman in front of a Calgary elementary school who was under a no-contact order. What did he murder her with, Madam Speaker?
The Honourable Member. Minister.
The weapons that are being used in terms of violence against women include guns. That's what we've heard at committee. That's why we implemented legislation to freeze handgun sales and to regulate the fact that red flag laws.
The Honourable Member.
This man who took this woman's life in front of her children on an elementary school yard was, I will ask again, who was previously charged with domestic violence offences, released under a no-contact order and had active warrants against him. This member or this minister wants to bring up guns. I ask again, how was this woman murdered by a repeat offender who was out on warrants?
The Honourable Minister.
I would say again, because this is an issue that needs to be addressed, is that guns and gangs relate to keeping people safe. When that member and her party votes against funding for guns and gangs, they're not keeping Canadians safe, nor Canadian women.
Honourable Member.
Charged with a domestic violence offence in July 2023. He was released on bail on the condition to have no contact with his estranged wife. He was charged with violating that release condition in September and again in November. He stabbed her. This is appalling to hear from the Minister of Justice when victims are watching. So I go to the Minister to say this. This is a letter from the friends of Kristen French, who was murdered by Paul Menardo. Once again, we are saddened and disappointed that the Government of Canada has added to the continued emotional trauma and victimization of the many people who have been affected by this man and his brutal crimes. To know that so much communication took place about the transfer, and yet no one deemed it important enough to ensure that the Minister was addressed personally speaks yet again to the disregard of victims in our criminal justice system. So my question to the member is, since he didn't make any public statement last week, which was Victims and Survivors of Crime Week, how come he has not followed through on the Liberal promise to review the Canadian Victims' Bill of Rights?
Minister.
I work in close collaboration with the Ombudsperson for Victims and with victims groups around the country. And what I would say to the victims, including the French family, is that my heart feels for them and for the loss that they've experienced at the hands of a very heinous killer. That is a crime that affected the entire nation and continues to affect the entire nation. What I would also reiterate for the member opposite is that decisions about parole and corrections and release are obviously governed at arm's length by the Parole Board of Canada and are also under the domain of the Minister of Public Safety.
The honourable member.
How many years ago did you promise to enforce and review the Canadian Victim Bill of Rights? Through you, Madam.
The honourable minister.
With respect to victims' services and victims' needs, we are attentive to them. I'm constantly prioritizing them, and that is...
Honourable member.
2020, that was promised, and it's never been done. There is no authority specifically dedicated to ensuring the implementation of the Canadian Victim Bill of Rights. Victims must rely on the official of the Federal Ombudsman for Victims of Crime. Does he think that is fair for victims?
The honourable minister.
Victims is demonstrated through the prioritization of legislation that we've put through this House, and I would include in that regard the Sex Offender Registry, which was struck down by the Supreme Court of Canada. We worked with PACE successfully through this House and the Senate to reinstall the Sex Offender Registry to keep women in particular safe from...
The honourable member.
They were called to do a review in 2020. On behalf of victims everywhere, what a shameful representation from the Minister of Justice that this Canadian Victims Bill of Rights has never been reviewed. I asked the Minister today, he is the Minister of Justice, to name the 4 issues that have been asked to be reviewed. Because in this country, criminals have more rights than victims. What are they? Please tell the victims watching.
Again, address questions and comments through the chair. The honourable minister.
What I would say to these questions is that I'm encouraged by the member's passion in terms of defence of victims, including women who are victims of violence. What I would hope is that her leader would demonstrate the same commitment towards women's rights generally, including women's rights.
The honourable member.
Absolutely desperate and pathetic, and that is a shameful, shameful response. Last question, because this minister says he's so concerned about Bill C-63 that he is in charge of bringing forward to the House. If it's so important to protect children, why hasn't he done it?
The honourable minister.
I reject categorically the accusation that raising the issue of a woman's right to choose, a woman's control over her reproductive rights, is something that should be the subject of scorn by any member of Parliament. These are constitutionally protected rights that are protected by Section 7, which is one of the provisions that's subject to the notwithstanding clause that her leader is cavalier.
The honourable minister. A member.
So, wow. Okay, so we have an increase of 815% under this minister's watch involving online sexual luring. He's trying to distract. He doesn't want to answer the questions. He's the one that's brought up his proverbial Bill C-63 that's going to solve all these problems, which he said Canada is not unsafe, yet we have stats, increase in crime, 101% of violent crime, of gun crime. So my question through you, Madam Chair, to the minister, why, if Bill C-63 is so important and he's so worried about public safety and so worried about victims, has he not brought it forward to the House?
The honourable minister.
Madam Chair, we've tabled that legislation. We're looking forward to having it voted upon in this House and proceed to committee as fast as possible, because the luring that she mentioned is child predation. It's something that her and I hopefully can agree upon that we need to cure. And that is one of the things that would be tackled through this legislation, among other things. She's been spending a lot of time talking about women's rights. Women who are cowered through revenge porn would also be addressed through Bill C-63, because it's a second form of content that would be subject to a 24-hour takedown requirement. Surely we can agree on the necessity of prioritizing.
The honourable member.
I will ask right now for the minister to redeem himself just a tiny bit and give a date right now when he will review the Victims' Bill of Rights so that victims' rights are actually enforced in Canada. The date, please.
The honourable minister.
Working to ensure the rights of victims, including female victims, are entrenched in law in Canada. That's why Bill C-21 included red flag laws. That's why we established the Sex Offender Registry. That's why I've worked on 2 occasions to ensure that there's a reverse on bail.
The honourable member. 40 seconds.
Liberals promised to review the Victim Bill of Rights, which was created by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. They have never done this. Victims deserve a date, and they deserve it right now. When will it be reviewed, and when will victims come first in Canada?
Honourable Minister.
Our commitment to victims, including victims of intimate partner violence, is steadfast, and that is witnessed through our reforms through Bill C-48, and Bill C-75, which dealt with the reverse onus on bail for people who are victims of intimate partner violence. That's demonstrating our commitment to victims, and we will continue to do so.
Resuming debate.